My name is Andy McDonald. I'm the Programme Director with the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership. And I'm delighted to be here today to provide a webinar on the Sharing and Growth Programme. We've been working with Andy Page, the Chief Exec at Sharing and Growth for a while now. We'd hoped to kick this off before the COVID lockdown, so I'm really pleased that we're the place we are now when it's open for applications. And I just wanted to make sure that potential participants have got as much information as possible to enable them to apply for this. So just a couple of quick housekeeping things. The webinar is being recorded. That's so that we can share it with other potential participants as we're going. There's a Q&A box. Please do put in questions and we'll answer those at the end of the webinar. So don't use the chat function, use the Q&A function is the message there. I'm joined today by Andy Page, who's going to provide a background on sharing and growth, but also two other views, one from a recipient, John Stewart, who is a recipient of sharing and growth, just to give a view from the end user's perspective, and also by Simon Forster, who's one of the delivery partners. So hopefully that'll give you a flavour of the different aspects of the programme. So that's the lineup for today. I'm going to do a brief overview of OWGP, just to provide the context, and then I'm going to do that as quickly as possible, because I think the main aspect of today is really to provide information around the programme itself. So in terms of the growth partnership, OWGP was set up as part of the sector deal, offshore wind sector deal. It's really there as a programme to increase competitiveness of the UK supply chain in order to win a large amount of UK content and increase exports. So it's funded by members of the Offshore Wind Industry Council, so it's industry funded, £100 million budget over 10 years. It's delivered by Catapult through the mechanism of an independent company called Offshore Wind Growth Partnership Limited. Its aim is to support companies, and there's two ways that we do that. So firstly, we provide business transformation, and secondly, we provide project grants. So those are the two mechanisms. We'll talk about this. The overall aims of the programme itself is really to help companies to become more competitive, and that's what we call Strand A, is about business competitiveness, making companies better so they can win more contracts. We also have a number of other aims, which are around bringing in new entrants into the market, so building new capacity. So there's a larger proportion of UK companies bidding for work and being successful for work. And we also have a strand on supply chain futures, which is about embedding IP into the UK to create a sustainable industry going forward. So those are the strands of the programme, those are the aims. In terms of delivery, it's about business transformation and grant funding. So grant funding is about providing cash to companies to enable them to invest in projects and programs to improve what they're doing. The business transformation side is about providing expertise and specialists into companies to help them to become more competitive. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So in the business transformation side, that's then split into a higher intensity and a lower intensity type of program. So two different aspects to the same aim of providing expertise in. So sharing and growth, which we're going to talk about today, is about helping larger companies to improve their competitiveness. It's an intensive program over a longer term period, and putting people into the company and bringing in training partners, which we'll hear about later. The Wind Expert Support Toolkit is at the other end of the spectrum. It's about providing domain expertise into companies, roughly 2 to 10 days of specialist support, providing companies with market entry expertise, market intelligence, that kind of thing. Both these programs are now open. I just wanted to provide that context before going on to sharing and growth, because to make sure that you're working with us on the right program. The website covers both of those. So do go to the website, do make sure that you're registered, click on the big I'm interested button at the top, If you want to see the opportunities, both the grant funding and the business transformation, then they're under the opportunities tab on the website. So that's a brief background to OWGP. Hopefully that's enough to put the Sharing and Growth Programme in context. Like I say, we've got an excellent lineup of speakers. We've got Andy Page, we've also got John Stewart and Simon Foster to follow. So I'm going to hand over to Andy. Andy is the Chief Exec at Sharing and Growth, also the co-founder of Sharing and Growth. So a huge amount of experience of delivering the programme within the aerospace sector and how we can take it across to offshore wind. So Andy, over to you.
Thank you, Andy, and good afternoon to everybody. Thank you very much for joining this. In this slot, I want to cover three things. I'll talk a little bit about who we are. I'll talk broadly about the approach that we take, and then obviously much more specifically about what you can expect from the opportunity that we've got here. But it's always hard to try and articulate what this program is about. So the first thing I want to do is just to play you a short video, 3-minute video, which is talking heads from people that have been intimately involved with this in the time that we've been doing this. I think we're missing the sound, Lynn.
We'll see if we can get the sound sorted. I'm not sure if everyone can hear sound at the moment. I'll put the YouTube link in the chat functionality, so that if you do want to go back and watch the video, then that is available on YouTube at the link that I've put in the chat box. And we'll just try that again and see if it works.
By the end of this year, we'll have grown to 50 million.
Our productivity has increased by 38%.
Delivering somewhere between 30 and 60% productivity gains.
Our margins improved from -6% to +20%.
Increased our order book by up to circa £30 million.
We've doubled our turnover per person.
We've recently won and announced the biggest contract by any measure in the history of the company.
In July, we won a £70 million contract from Rolls-Royce. We would not have won that without the intervention of Sharing and Growth over the previous 4 years.
We're adding long-term agreements that allows us to invest heavily for the future in people and in capital equipment.
What Sharing and Growth has helped us deliver is the ability to transform our people and upskill our people to make sure we make the most of that investment.
I know it's an organisation that isn't there to try and sell me anything. They're going to work with me and support me.
Sharing and Growth is embedded within the organisation, working alongside us rather than working for us.
I think the leadership part for us has been very much an eye-opener. How we behave, how we lead our people.
It brings a lot of large company thinking, corporate strategy, and better understanding on how to get from a small business to a medium to a large.
Sharing and Growth doesn't come with a one-size-fits-all approach. They recognise that each site has different needs. We have world-class external training that otherwise might be unaffordable.
Brings all those pieces together as one business transformation, not just single elements, a complete package.
We are confident that we will reach our target of £8 billion worth of orders. This is absolutely open cross-sectorally.
Other countries and other governments are absolutely determined to take a larger market share of what we do. And they don't always play by the same rule set we play with in the EU and in the UK. And if Sharing and Growth is, and it is, a viable option for us to leverage, then it's a must-do. They've got their tactics and what they can do to unlevel the playing field. We've got sharing growth.
I'm sure you can realise now why I was keen that you got to see that video and heard it from people like that firsthand. So, as I say, let me go into the three things: who we are, the broad approach we take, and what you can expect. So if we just go to the next slide. So, Sharing in Growth, we were set up in 2012. We founded the company then. Its genesis actually comes from Rolls-Royce, but we built the organisation now. There are circa 100 full-time people, employees who are experts in the various different business fields that you would find in high-value companies. So it can be operations people, it can be procurement people, sales people, finance people, etc., etc. But the beauty of this is we created this scalable model that also allows us to tap into some very close colleagues, the deeper experts that we've brought into this program as well, who are shown on the diagram on the right-hand side, who will cover the deeper side of the leadership. They'll cover strategy, they'll cover finance, they'll cover operations, metrology and manufacturing. And Simon, who you'll get to hear from a little bit later, is one of our close friends who is part of that community. But the point to make, and it was referenced briefly in that video, is whilst this is a very broad offering in terms of what we are able to bring, it has to be brought to you as an integrated program. So the work that we have done in the background to make sure that all of these people are speaking the same language, you know, that they understand the context of what each other person is doing, so that we can then dip into that as each of your business needs requires, is an essential part of this. And a point of clarity around this. So, you know, OWGP, as Andy says, have a £100 million budget, of which a proportion of this will be deployed through this mechanism. But the money is not money that is there for either capital or for technology. There are other vehicles for doing that. This is about approaching you, your people, your processes and your capability, and leaving you with the knowledge to be able to sustain that improvement going forward. If we go to the next slide, please. So a little bit of background there for about the context in which we've worked. As I say, since 2012, we've worked with over 60 companies across the UK. The programme that is focused on aerospace, we have also done a programme in civil nuclear previously, is a £300 million gross programme with £100 million support predominantly from the government and an amount of in-kind from Rolls-Royce too. Our objective is to secure 8,000 high-value manufacturing jobs in this programme, and I'll explain a little bit where we've got to. It has become a key part of the Aerospace Growth Partnership, which is the equivalent, if you like, organisation that is looking to secure the strength of the sector in the UK. And you'll see some very famous household names at the bottom there that have embraced this and their supply chain too. So if I now just talk to you quickly about results, so just to give an indication across that portfolio, we are seeing step change in the performance. The focus of the aerospace programme was very much around accelerating the growth of the sector. The backstory in that particular case was that the UK peer group relative to the international competition was losing ground to its market. So there is a bit of a clue in the title of our organisation, which is how do you actually share in the growth of the whole of the sector? How do you actually get people to become competitive and capable? You'll see on the graphs here, in this particular case, measured by both sales and net worth, that we are seeing statistical differences between the peer group and the participants on the programme. We have recently been audited by BAYS, who have also validated that there is a statistical difference in turnover and employment with the companies that have been on the programme, which was a very pleasing thing to have. We've also recently been recognised by Princess Anne's sponsored City of Guilds programme for impact and excellence too, which we were extremely proud recipients of just a couple of months ago. In terms of our headline, if you remember from the previous slide, we were looking to secure 8,000 jobs. Actually, we've already exceeded that, and we've still got a couple of years running on the programme. So with regards to our commitments to BAYS in this particular case, we're about 2 years ahead by virtue of the fact that the companies have secured about £5 billion worth of contracts. But the bottom bullet, I think, is almost the most important one, because whilst ultimately it is about business results, and it has to be very, very targeted towards making sure that it has an impact, actually the sign that our influence is working has to come from the clarity and the confidence of the leadership team and the ability for them, therefore, to raise their ambition. And that is now being validated by external people, particularly investors and customers, who are advising us that they see the change in the leadership thinking as a consequence of our activity. So that's broadly who we are, obviously, with a little bit of results. What I'd like to do now is move on to our broad approach by starting to look at the barriers that we would typically find. And here, I guess I'm appealing to you. I don't know your companies, obviously, but seeing whether or not you identify yourself in what we have seen, in the time that we've been doing this, and in the case of many of the people in our organisation, the expertise actually that they brought to the organisation in the first place. So we recognise that competitive capability is a moving thing. International competition, is also a moving thing. And whichever circumstance you find yourself in, the need to continually drive competitive capability is there. So if the left-hand side of the diagram is simply a proxy to say there needs to be a challenge, because there is a challenge to the market, what are the things that are the barriers? We would sort of boil it down very simplistically into 4 things, and this is an oversimplification, but just for as a starter for the conversation. It is first and foremost about productivity. It's one of those overused words, but fundamentally, how can you grow your revenue without necessarily growing your cost base? How do you get, therefore, a bigger bang for your buck? And within that is the thing that you do that adds value, that you sell. How can you do that quicker and faster and better? But perhaps just as important, how can you strip out the stuff that isn't adding value? And those 2 things, certainly we've found in the sectors that we've worked with, is the ability to focus on value add actually is quite mature. The ability to actually understand how to take waste out is much less mature, and therefore lots of opportunity. Many companies as well have a very deep supply chain. It has surprised us in many cases when the cost of purchases for many companies are the predominant part of their revenue. So actually, organizations are often a supply chain integrator as well as adding value. Yet the processes that they use to do that can be very primitive and very administrative, and certainly not adding any sort of advantage to the customer. So there's a whole nother section there around sub-tier supply chain management, which we would see as a typical weakness in companies we've seen. The third one is around financial acumen, and I think there's 2 flavors to this. One is, do you genuinely understand where your profit is made? Do you understand what it costs to provide your product or service? Which obviously is quite a detailed understanding of cost. The other end of the spectrum is, do you actually have a coherent business plan that understands growth ambition, but actually understands the impact on your cost of sales, the impact that productivity will have to bring, the impact on capital, in order to make that a coherent business plan so that you can set the objectives for the organization to be able to realize it. But if there's one thing that trumps all of those, it is the leadership capability. And certainly in the time that we've been doing this, we constantly come back to this and we constantly reinforce this part, because the ability to set direction, the ability to engage people, the ability to govern, the ability to get the best out of your people actually is the catalyst for almost everything else. So we would put a lot of emphasis therefore onto making sure that that is appropriate for your business, and that we can help and guide you through that. So if I go on to the next slide, this is, I've stepped up a step here just in this description, and there is an element of philosophy here, really just to explain our motivation to you. Once we actually get into the doing activity, we may reflect on this occasionally, but it isn't the thing that you will see. You'll see things that are far more tangible and tactical. But I thought it's just important in order to explain the motivation of how we do this. So we talk about maintaining balance on a three-legged stool. At the top of this diagram, what is the direction for the organization? You know, what is the clarity and the confidence by which you convey your vision, your mission, your strategy to the organization? Coming down the right-hand side then, how do you cascade that? How do you get things done? How do you govern it? You know, how do you control the doing bit of the human in order that stuff gets done? But really importantly, and this is the bit where I think, you know, when time and money is short, programs and companies tend to start cutting time and cost, is the left-hand side of the diagram, which is how do you actually engage the human being as well, you know, by making sure that you are exhibiting the values that stimulate them to do the right thing, the behaviors that are appropriate for the organization, the engagement in order to make sure you're getting the most out of them. Now, underpinning all of that, of course, you do have to have processes and skills. So at the end of the day, what we will bring is the training activity in order to generate those processes and skills, but very importantly, making sure that we're creating the environment by which people are motivated for the being that they are and the doing that they need to do. So that's, as I say, broadly, as a sort of philosophical approach. Much more specifically now, if I just touch on typical areas of intervention on the next slide. This is, I say typical very, very advisedly, because what we mustn't assume, what you mustn't assume from this is that there is a course, that there is a fixed syllabus, you know, that there is a day 1 and a day 12 and a day 20 and a day 90, and they are always the same. That will never work in the context of individual businesses, with individual ambitions, with individual priorities. So it has to start with an amount of analysis of what is your business ambition, what is your start point, what is your end point, and therefore we will then focus in on the activities that will create that change that is necessary. So yes, it will probably always have an element of leadership development, business culture, business strategy and finance, because they're typically generic. But then when you get into the focused activities, it might be around digesting new business. It may be around operational performance and operational excellence. It may be about generating new sales opportunities and how to go ahead and win those. But the method by which we do it is very much stand shoulder to shoulder with you. So the diagram on the first slide that showed the community, these are people that will be in your business. They will stand shoulder to shoulder with the people in your business. They will be working on the things that matter on a day-to-day basis. And therefore, as much as we can, what we're trying to do is to stitch ourselves into the day-to-day work that you would and should be doing anyway. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't an element of disruption, because of course you're investing in change here, but we try to minimize that as best as we can in order to achieve the business output. So, you know, this is not intended to be send people away for a course somewhere or other and bring them back again and hope they haven't forgot it by the time they get back into the factory. It is about learning by doing in the context of your business, attached to the objectives of the business. So, third section then of my presentation, if we just talk a little bit there for about the specific approach that the opportunity that we want to present to you today. And Lynn will talk in more detail about this later on. So I'll just talk about it in a sort of conceptual way in order to bring out the key points of the program content. If this has sparked curiosity, and we will be offering, as I say, Lynn will describe this in more detail, the opportunity to have one-to-one conversations in order to understand this in more detail. You will then provide an expression of interest. We'll then go through an amount of due diligence and evaluation of the application, of course, which would lead to the grant of award of circa £150,000. The first thing that we will then do is we will want to get to know you, of course. So we will want to engage. We will want to therefore understand strengths and weaknesses, but more importantly, we'll want to understand where your aspirations are in order to then do the compare and contrast with the strengths and weaknesses and then prioritize. So all of that central circle is a means to an end, and it is designed to be at a weight where it is purely there to then create the priority for the focused intervention. And the focused intervention goes back to the previous slide. it may be you're digesting new business. It may be that you know, you've got great product, but you've got no orders. Whatever the business challenge might be, but it needs to be a substantive business challenge that we can then sink our teeth into. The arrow at the bottom, though, is important, and this is why we're so excited about the opportunity that OWGP are providing here, which is, I've described this as a linear process, and the end of this line would suggest that this is where it ends. What we would like to do, though, is as we go through this intervention, we get to know you better, you get to know what you need to do and the activities that underpin that, so that we can demonstrate ongoing benefit, which would allow you then to come back for a second bite of this and potentially more depending upon the opportunity. So think of this therefore as part of, you know, your company strategy and how you would actually develop the longer term intent and the longer term activities. Next slide goes into the lowest level of detail I want to touch on for today. So just a little insight into the types of things that we will be looking at when we first get to know you against 4 parameters. So we'll want to understand your business maturity. Hopefully, you know, we will all agree on that. We do pride ourselves on the ability, obviously, to challenge where there are potentially blind spots. At this stage, we'll look at the critical processes only. Our maturity assessment for the critical processes, we happen to call them the golden buttons, has 38 parameters on it. To put it into context, as we get to know you better and better, and through the course of the activities, we will gather information that we can feed back to you, ultimately across about 205 parameters. But to start with, let's just concentrate on the really important ones. The second one is, what is your ambition? And more importantly, where is it going to come from? So how articulate are you about the product or service that you want to sell to the market, the attributes of that market, and what challenge that puts on you about speeding up your responsiveness, reducing your cost, improving your quality, whatever it might be, so that we can then actually start to formulate the things that are the internal challenges in order to meet your aspiration. I touched a lot on leadership. We'll want to start off by doing what we call a cultural analysis. So broadly put, you know, how aligned is the leadership team? Are you short or long-term thinkers? What is your appetite for risk? How do you take decisions in the organization in order to be able to guide and shape that? And then obviously there's an element of financial baseline. You know, you are companies, you are businesses. This is obviously the objective. Anything that we do therefore needs to move the needle on the obvious parameters there. Right, and then we get into the real doing activity. So this next slide is obviously icons. The words behind the slides effectively say it needs to be a tight scope. So whether or not it's a campaign to look at your business development in order to perhaps lift up your order book, whether or not it's a campaign to introduce a new product or service and the digestion of that, or whether it's about optimizing what you currently do for cost, for quality, for delivery and or safety. You know, that it doesn't really matter what it is. That's part of the analysis phase, of course. But once we know what it is, it needs to be very firmly bounded. It needs to have an objective, it needs to have a scope, and more importantly, it needs to therefore have targets that people can associate and align to. So that leads me nicely on to the next slide, which talks about sort of outputs and commitments. So just to understand sort of quid pro quo to this, that focused intervention will have what are called here tactical KPIs. So we're talking about an activity over 6 to 9 months. What are the specifics? And they will be entirely bespoke, as I've mentioned a couple of times, whether or not it's sales or operations or product or service digestion, whatever it might be. But taking into account what OWGP wants to achieve strategically out of this, and also taking into account that sort of iterative opportunity of being able to come back for the second or more rounds, we'll want to build up a set of strategic KPIs. What is it that you would need to do as a business in order to be able to grow turnover, headcount, exports, R&D activity, and therefore in details the contracts that you have won or retained that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to do. And that's a picture we'll want to build up as we get to know you. Your commitment to this, it perhaps sounds a little flippant to say ambition. I genuinely don't mean it like that. I think it is fundamentally about ambition. If you have decided in your minds that you want to do this, then everything else will follow, because you'll know that it's not just a nice to do, it is essential for what you want to do. You will therefore commit the time necessary. You'll therefore make sure the focus is there. You'll therefore make sure that it matters in the eyes of everybody watching your behaviours when we actually launch this. Very, very specifically, you do not have to put in cash into this, but you do have to measure the time as a proxy for the effort that you're putting into this programme. And one final slide from me before I hand over. What this opportunity will also enable you to do, though, is to join the community of all of the other companies that are going through or have been through this programme. We use that community very constructively. We do host at each other's facilities smaller groups in order to sort of show and tell and learn and participate. We also do a lot of reward and recognition activity, and we do have our important event once a year where we actually get all of the companies together in one place to both celebrate but also to accelerate the learning from each other. So I'm going to conclude at that point. Very, very happy to take questions on the Q&A when we get to the end of the presentation. So on that note, thank you very much.
Andy, thanks very much for that. It's a fantastic introduction. And the kind of key points I'm taking away from it is that this is a programme with a strong track record and a strong track record of success, which we want to take across to the offshore wind sector. And also the programmes are very much bespoke. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's very much tailored to the companies and the companies' needs, which I think is really important for the companies in our sector. Do put questions into the Q&A box as we go along so that we can answer those when we get to the end. So please do. There's been a few of those coming in, but do keep feeding those in so that we can answer those when we get to it. I've got three more speakers. So I've got a view from a beneficiary, a view from a delivery partner, and then Lynn McIntosh is going to provide the kind of the logistics and actually next steps following on from that. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, John Stewart. John is a mechanical engineer by trade, but has worked across a number of companies within the supply chain and the aerospace sector, working on manufacturing and business transformation. He's for the last 3-4 years been the chief exec at Senior Aerospace Bellows. So John, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. Right. Can everybody see me okay?
Yeah, it's good, John.
Thank you. So thanks very much for asking me to come along and talk about our experience with sharing growth. For me, the start of the journey, I mean, we've been sharing growth now for nearly 4 years. The start of it was really all around the strategy for the business and how we could deliver that ambition, that strategy, through better leadership, through creating a culture which encouraged growth, which encouraged innovation, I guess. So we looked at that to start with, and I guess I felt very comfortable with the sharing growth approach because we were using, for example, Institute for Manufacture at the University of Cambridge, where we did a lot of work around our product grouping, what markets do we want to be in. We're heavily aerospace. We were 85% aerospace, but we had a very important non-aerospace part to our business, which we're growing at the moment. So it was very logical how we approached it. My team initially were very skeptical. They felt that how could we possibly do this initiative when we've got our day job. And I explained that actually this was to become the day job. And really, I think the penny dropped about in year 2, when we suddenly started to see some results coming through. And I'll take you through some of those things. So in terms of the culture, we started off in the mid-70s in a garage. Phil Bird and a couple of mates started building bellows for the oil and gas industry and the power industry. It grew very quickly. In the 80s, he decided to put a toe into the aerospace industry, and that was a great strategic decision at the time. But it was very much a owner-managed business, and what I was looking to do with the business was to make it scalable. So to make it scalable, we had to have a very clear ambition ahead of us. We had to have a very clear plan. We had to understand what culture we really wanted for the business, and to bring people along. So there's a lot around communication, which was really important to us all. And I think the thing that Sharing Growth brought, if I can describe it as giving us the bandwidth to get done what we needed to do quicker than we would have done it on our own. I think that sort of sums up for me the impact it's had with us as a company. I think in terms of a differentiator, Sharing Growth are, they're really individual people working with a common goal, understanding the business very well, and they're subject matter experts. You'll hear from Simon Forster subsequently. We work with Simon a lot on the communication, a lot on the leadership, the culture, the behaviours, and ultimately leading to the values in the business. So we went out to the business, and the union representatives and the employee representatives presented to the management team. These are the values that we've all talked about. These are the values we want the business to live up to behave to. That was a massive change in the business, the way we thought, and it aligned people to that culture of working together, being honest, trusting, respecting each other. Quality throughout. This was our Bible then to work to. So it was very interesting that once we'd set all that up strategically, under the surface, if you like, we were working on things like on-time delivery. We had huge arrears. We had $500,000. We were a 29 million business when SiG came in. And at the end of last year, we were 36 million. So we had a 7 million increase over 3.5 years. We had $500,000 of arrears at the time when they came in. We had about 30,000 arrears at the end of last year. I'm talking pre-COVID, by the way. We then had about a 70% on-time delivery, which created the arrears. Obviously, we're now in the low 90s on-time delivery. Our efficiency on the shop floor was about 70%. It's now 90%. And all of these things, these hard-won, KPIs, were down to the fact that we led the business as one. The leadership team became one team, leading them with Sharing Growth and working alongside some really good subject matter experts. And they gave us that capacity to do the work, as I say, quicker than we would have otherwise done on our own. So I guess the other area that we touched on, we had a lot of problems with bringing in new products into the business. Would you believe, I'm an engineer, so I can say this, the engineers project manage their own projects. So that wasn't really going to be a successful outcome. And we had a lot of products which were poor performers in terms of price. So we worked with the Institute for Manufacturing, and we did some work around new product introduction. We brought in a couple of project managers. We basically took the strategy, brought in new product, and we worked on these products with what we call the sprint. So we have a 12 or 13 week sprint. So we basically drive the project through very, very quickly and efficiently, because it's all about planning. And at the start, we had a great plans up front, and we drove it. So every week the executive meet, we manage by exception now. So any projects which are amber or red, we'll discuss, we'll see what corrective action we need. So it's that short-term intervention delivering the outcome, it's hard work. You've got to keep at it, but that eventually delivers the strategy for you. So I would say, if there were three things about sharing growth, you have to have an open mind about it. You have to be willing to, take a fair bit of feedback from these guys, and it's not always positive. You've got to have an open mind. The second thing is you have to work with the sharing growth team, not against them, and that sort of resistance. If there's any sort of resistance there, you won't get the desired result. The third thing is have a clear ambition of what you want to achieve and measure the heck out of it as you go through the program. That to me really taught me, to measure is to know, looking at KPIs, really analysing the SPC data on variations in manufacturing, looking at our scrap. We used to scrap £480,000 a year. That's scrap, that's the cost of labour and material, £480,000 on a 29 million business. Can you believe that? We're now down about 125,000 a year on a 36 million business, just because we measured the heck out of that to get to the root cause and corrective actions and drive home what we need to do. So I'm very comfortable with the process. I know what it's done for us as a business. It's been a fantastic achievement for everybody at Bird Bellows. Obviously, we've gone through quite a difficult period in the short term, and I'd just like to mention that sharing growth helped us, get through that survival piece, because we lost a third of our business overnight, and that's quite a catastrophic effect to any business. But working with sharing growth, we took difficult decisions in terms of the headcount, the cost base. We've had to take 3 million costs out of the business annualized just to survive, frankly. And now we're starting to see orders come back in slowly. And because the business was so robust, we've survived that. We've so far we've weathered that storm, and we're starting to look to the future. And what we're saying now, our ambition hasn't changed, but what we're saying is we need to grow back different to we were before. So the 36 million last year will be 36 million in maybe 3 years' time, but we'll look different then to where we were last year. We'll have more automation, we'll have more robotics, we'll have better processes in place, because we have to do that to compete in an ever competitive market. And I think we're well placed to do that. I think we're a really robust business. We do upper quartile returns on profit and cash. We've got a very robust workforce, very stable workforce. We've got a good management team. And I'm confident that we can get through the next sort of 18 months to 2 years and move on again with our ambition to really be a fantastic organisation. It's a bit like snakes and ladders, we clawed our way from 29 to 36. We're back down to 23 now, but we're going to get back to 36. And I've no doubt that we can do that working with sharing growth, which has been a fantastic experience. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, obviously stick them in the chat box and we can talk about it later. Thank you.
John, thank you very much for that. It's great to hear those insights from first hand. I'm sure there's already questions coming in on the Q&A, so I'm sure there will be more, and I'm sure people will be very interested to hear your kind of first hand story of it. What I'm picking up is the ability of sharing and growth to adapt and change as your needs changed as well, which I think is important, particularly in the environment we're in at the moment. So thanks very much for that, John. Our next speaker is kind of moving on to the other side of the coin, I guess, looking at how some of the support is provided. It's provided both through sharing and growth directly, but also through partner organisations, delivery partners, and there's a number that's covering different areas that Andy talked about at the top. So one of the partners is Inspire Training Solutions. Simon Forster, the director there, is going to give us an update of how sharing and growth looks from the training partner aspect and some of his insights from that side. So Simon, if you're able to talk to us now. Thank you.
Beautiful, thanks Andrew. Thanks very much for the opportunity to come and have a chat, and thanks very much for everyone who's signing on and listening. I know it's busy times at the moment, you've got lots to do, so hopefully what I can do is give you a little bit more insight in terms of one or two of the areas that we're involved in, but it's also a reflection for the other things that you can expect from sharing growth. Maybe not all of it, because as Andy's already said, it's not necessarily all applicable for everybody, but that's one of the strengths of it. It's about getting something that's targeted. So have the first slide, please. That'll be fabulous. A little bit about us. The organisation's called Inspire. We've been going now for 23 years. And as Andy Page touched on earlier on, there are specialists in different areas. We're one of the delivery partners, and our field is about performance psychology. As a friend of mine once said, it's about getting the people thing right. You can put your policies and your process and your systems in, which is right and proper and absolute, but you then got to get the people side of it right. For our side, we also work on the business aspect. So we work with SMEs and blue chips outside of sharing and growth. We also work in the field of health in terms of education, and we've also worked in the field of sports. So our kind of expertise is across sector, whether it be fast-paced, whether it be slow-paced, be it business, be it kind of educational health. And we've just started working with acquisitions. Some investment companies are working on acquisitions, and how can we start to get those kind of moving? And now we're backing all that up with a little bit of executive coaching as and when and where it's needed. In terms of with SiG, we've been with SiG since the beginning, proud to be a partner since the beginning. So we've kind of grown and we've developed and we've adapted as we've gone through. We're active on the leadership program, so we get involved very early doors. We also get active in terms of the cultural and behavioural analysis, and I'll expand on that in just a second. To us, that's a key area in terms of making sure that we deliver exactly what Andy touched on earlier, which is a bespoke solution. It's not cookie cutter, it's not off the shelf, it is literally what is designed to deliver what you wanted it to actually deliver. We also get involved in the Team Leader Academy and also the Lighthouse Cell that Andy touched on before as well. So developing the up and coming leaders, but also getting these high performance cells as well. Go to the next slide, please. And what do we mean by high performance? Well, I'd just like to share a little model. This is a model that we kind of use, but it aligns perfectly in terms of with what SiG is doing. For us, stage one, whether you're talking about an acquisition, whether you're talking about a beneficiary within sharing growth, the need to have this clarity of objective. As human beings, we are goal-orientated creatures. We get up in the morning, we set ourselves goals, the time we've got to get out of the house, the jobs we've got to do at work, etc. But it's not just about having a goal. It's not just about having a hard objective to achieve X amount by Y amount. Part of that objective is also about capturing the heart, not just the head, but capturing the heart. And it's about having this thing that's called a powerful vision. Now, I know it sounds kind of very fluffy to people, but if you want people to buy in, and to pick up what John's just said, if you want a group of independent people working with a common goal, but actually working with passion and displaying the right behaviours, a vision's a key thing to do, an absolutely key element of it. There are multiple stories, many of which I share, but the most common one that we absolutely love is the Apollo 11 story. This is the one where in 1963, John F. Kennedy inspired creativity, innovation, and drive by standing there and saying, by the end of this decade, we will have put a man on the moon. Well, with respect, so what? In 1963, the technology existed to put a man on the moon. His next line, the vision, was what really transformed that creativity and that drive. Because he said, the power to put a man on the moon and bring him home safely again. That wasn't available in 1963, so that had to be developed. That was all about creativity. That was all about growth. And that's the power of having a compelling vision. But once we have the vision, the question is, what is it? What is it that's actually going to achieve that vision? Because the vision's not enough. And this is where we talk about having a strategy. And it's the strategy that Andy touched on earlier on, which is absolutely right and proper. Your strategy for growth. Where can we grow in the marketplace? Which sectors of the marketplace? Brilliant stuff. But strategy also goes beyond that. It's also about having this internal strategy in terms of how do we embed this vision? How do we get this creativity embedded in the organization? How do we get excellent lines of communication? Every organization has great levels of communication. Unfortunately, the best forms of communication is usually over a cup of coffee, outside having a cigarette, and done by rumours. So how can we embed this vision and create this kind of one team internally? How do we get people operating at the right levels? How do we get them consistently measuring the right things and being self-empowered? So when we start talking strategy, it isn't just about the external growth strategy. As part of the leadership program, we and the other delivery partners, we start saying, how can we bed this in an organization so it's continuous, not a one-hit wonder, literally becomes a continuous process. But of course, all this sounds common sense. The question then is, what is it that actually delivers strategy? Because strategy can be talked about, I'm sure we've all mapped it out. Delivering it is a different thing. For example, in 2017, Federal Exchange across in the US surveyed 3,000 companies. This was SMEs, blue chips, across sector, across market. And 1,348 of these managing directors responded. And part of the response was this. 50% of these managing directors identified culture, the culture in the organization, as the #1 driver of organizational value. It was the key thing in terms of what was the business worth. And I know from the acquisition side, it's a key element of it. 92% of the managing directors said, if we can improve our culture, it would have a direct impact, not just on performance, but also upon profitability. So it's not just about working harder, as the old phrase goes, we could work smarter. So 50% said it was the #1 driver of organizational value. 92% of them said improving culture would improve performance and profitability, and yet 16% of them said their culture was where it needed to be. Only 16%. And a question I like to pose is, if we know culture is that important and has that bigger impact, why can't we get it right? Why do organizations feel so challenged in aligning that culture and getting it right? So one of the things that we touch on it very, very early in terms of in the program, I know Andy Page touched on it a little bit earlier, is we start looking at what's the culture in the organization. But we look at it in 2 levels. We look at it alongside you, working with you, to say, right, what's the actual culture in the business, the real culture as it lives and breathes? And what's the desired culture? And this isn't a desired culture mapped off some kind of academic research from some institution. We're not using models that says the perfect business is. The desired culture is the culture that you need to adopt to deliver your strategy. For us, a culture is not good or bad. A culture just is. The question mark has to be, does the culture deliver your strategy? If it does, brilliant. If it doesn't, then as the old phrase says, and I'm sorry, I know it's difficult to actually read, if it doesn't deliver your strategy, then culture will eat strategy for breakfast. You can spend all the time, energy and money putting a strategy together. But if your culture doesn't deliver it, then Houston, we do have a problem. And we work on looking at the gaps in the culture and where we can actually, in terms of get involved on SiG's behalf together with the other delivery partners. But of course, culture doesn't just happen. It doesn't just appear. We can't order it from Amazon. So the question is, what is it that creates that culture? Well, culture is a complicated thing. It can be industry-led, it can be age group-led, it can be skill set-led. But the key element in an organization is about the leadership. So one of the things that we look at doing as part of the Sharing Growth Programme is we look at this thing called leadership capability. And I know Andy Page has touched on it a little bit early on in terms of the capability and the skill sets, which is right and proper. We look at it from a different way. We start to look at the leadership using various behavioral modeling tools and saying, what's the leadership's capability to deliver that culture? Can the leadership, through their natural style, deliver that culture? If the objective of the organization is to double in size in 3 years, if the strategy is 4 new products in 5 new marketplaces, the culture has to be creative for the new products. It's got to be expansionist in terms of mindset. And it's also got to be risk inclined. You've got to want to take a risk. If that's your map, but your leadership are autocratic and defensive, then once again, Houston, we got a problem because the leadership naturally can't create that level of culture. So what we look at do is we map across in terms of what's the natural leadership style. It's not good or bad. We look at natural leadership style. And then as that little glyph shows, we map it against culture. The blue map in this case being the existing culture, the orange being the desired culture. And we say, right, where's the gaps? Where can we step in with sharing and growth? And where can we put in a tailored support mechanism to develop your leadership to create this culture? So as Andy Page said earlier on, it's not about having 15 courses off the shelf that are delivered in a set strategy. This is tailor-made directly to every single beneficiary to ensure the leadership create the culture that delivers the strategy and ultimately will achieve your objectives. All of these are different. All these interactions are different. They're all, though, based on various strands. So we kind of choose what it is we're going to be doing based upon the need. If I go to the next slide, please. If I just give you a little insight in terms on one of them. It's a nice quick one just to give you a little bit of an insight into, but it's a key one. It was recognized by Harvard, something called the 20-60-20 rule. And it was recognized by Harvard. If you want to shift the culture, if you want to create a level of high performance, 20-60-20 rule is brilliant. And all it basically says is, if you can get 20% of people working together, and these are key elements, 20% of people working together consistently. So not just on a Monday morning or Friday afternoon when things are good, when things are bad, but doing it consistently. And another keynote, doing it over a period of time. We live in a culture where we want everything immediately. It doesn't happen. It's going to take a little bit of time. And this is a key element of leadership. So in this top 20%, it's about developing this top 20% as part of the leadership to work together consistently over a period of time. Because if you can get 20% of people working together, then 60% of people will then start to automatically follow. And when we say, why will they follow? And yeah, there's lots of conversations. We'll follow because we like to follow success. We see in sports, if there's a successful sports team, their shirts start to sell in shops. We like to be associated with success. But there's another key element in this, which is absolutely brilliant. If you can get 20% of people working together consistently for a period of time, 60% of people will follow without even realizing it. It's survival instinct. As humanity, we've developed as a herd animal. Our survival absolutely depends on us living as part of a herd. And that's not just from a psychological perspective, it's also a biological perspective. So in other words, our brains have developed, and parts of the brain are specifically designed to mirror other people's behavior. We copy other people's behavior. Whether it be stood in a pub where one person leans on the bar, and you'll see one person leans on the bar, the person opposite them, watch them, they'll automatically lean on the bar as well. People in coffee shops, one person crosses their legs, the other person will cross their legs. And if you've not experienced one of those, to me, the perfect example is this. If you've ever been in a room where one person yawned, and I'm not talking about a little stifle, I'm talking about the big arms out yawn. Because if you've been in a room where one person yawned, you'll know that that yawn rapidly spreads like wildfire. And it may be right now that some of you, I know I am, get a slight tensing at the back of the throat, even just talking about yawning. And these are the glial cells. This is our brain automatically mirroring behavior. So the model's beautiful. It says if we can get 20% of people working together consistently over a period of time, and that's where we work with the leadership, 60% of the organization will start to follow. Why? Pure survival. They'll do it without even knowing half the time. They'll mirror the correct behaviors, do the right thing, follow the right structures. So if we can get all of that going, what does that leave us? So what about the remaining 20%? If we get 80% of the herd moving in one direction, well, that leaves us with our bottom 20%. These are the ones that you may know. These are the neckheads. These are the mood hoovers. These are the energy vampires. These are the people who my boss used to use a phrase. He used to say, these are the people who brighten up rooms by leaving them. These are the people who always find a problem. No matter where it is, there's always a reason not to. Well, this 20% through sheer survival have a simple choice. And the choice is SUSO. I'm sure you know what it stands for. SUSO, they have a choice to shape up. Shape up means that they're going to match the behavior of the herd. So actually they start living to the standards. They start operating and delivering to the standards that's set by the herd because they want to. We want to be part of the herd to survive. And if they decide they don't want to shape up, then suddenly we've got an element of ship out. Well, I don't want to be part of your crew. I don't want to operate on those standards. Maybe they're different to what I'm capable of. Maybe I just don't want to. Maybe they're different to what I can achieve. But the model is simple. If we can get 20% of people working together consistently over a period of time, as I say, that's the leadership. 60% will follow. The bottom 20% will then have a choice. We create a culture of growth where the organization sets standards and the organization, the people within it, will start to follow it. You don't just retain your good people, you actually attract people who want to be part of a successful organization. As I say, there's a number of different elements. This is just one of the areas, and hopefully it kind of gives you a taste. And it is personalized back to every single beneficiary. So all of you would have different programs focusing on the elements that addresses your issues. If I can go to the final slide, please. So in summary, this is my last slide. For us, we kind of look at 4 things. It's about having this vision. It's about defining and maybe reframing what winning means, not just for yourself, but also for your team. The strategy is about the identification and then making the decisive moves. It's very easy to identify how do we make it, and that may be a change in leadership style. It may be doing something differently internally. It's about creating a culture that goes beyond employee engagement. It's not just about creating a culture where people are happy. It's about creating a culture that actively delivers on your strategy. And then the strategy delivers your objectives. So we want to go beyond this employee engagement. And then finally, there should be another one to come up, all being well. It's about having the leadership, and the leadership who authentically display the behavior. So it's true leadership, not talking, but actually doing it. And for me, please excuse me, I love my rugby and I love this quote. Eddie Jones was asked just before England went to the 2019 World Cup. And the question was, how good is this cup of tea? And apologies if you're not a rugby fan, and apologies if you're not an England fan, but it's a great quote. The question was, how good is this England rugby team? And he said, it's a bit like a tea bag, isn't it? You don't know how good it is until you put it in hot water. And it's the same in terms of the program as we put together. It's the same in terms of the culture. And right now, with the challenges that we're all kind of facing, it's even more important to get the culture, to get the leadership, to get the strategy, and to get those key objectives and visions absolutely right. And that's what we do at SiG. We personalize it back to the individual needs. I'll finish now. So if you have any questions, as everyone said, please pop it into the Q&A box. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for allowing me to come on. And big thanks to both Andrew and Lynn for giving me sort of 15 minutes during this session. It's much appreciated.
Simon, thank you very much for that. And again, you know, what I'm hearing is the kind of flexible approach and the different ingredients that make up sharing and growth. So Simon's given us a great insight into some of that. There's other areas that Andy touched on as well that complement that, and it's about building up what each individual company needs, whether it's around leadership, around operations, around manufacturing, and it's about how to pull those together and join those threads together. So thanks very much, Simon, on that. We've heard from Andy with the kind of overview. We've heard from John in terms of what it's like to be on the program and the benefits, and we've heard from Simon in terms of the delivery. Hopefully there's a good chunk of interest there in terms of what the program does. I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Lynn McIntosh, who's going to talk about the kind of the logistics of it and the eligibility and the criterion and how to apply and the kind of functional side of it. Once we've done that, we'll go back to the to Q&As. Again, do keep putting your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll take those at the end. So over to you, Lynn.
Thanks very much, Andy, and thanks also to Andy, John and Simon for what's been a really great webinar and great information shared on the Sharing and Growth Offshore Wind Programme and what it will be. So, as Andy mentioned, I'm going to take everyone through a little bit of an overview on the criteria for the programme and for the application to the programme, and also how to apply. So, the Sharing and Growth Offshore Wind Programme is open to companies who are already in the offshore wind sector and who are ambitious companies. And going right back to what Andy said in his presentation, we need companies who are ambitious and who want to drive growth and productivity within their companies. We do look for companies to have a site turnover of between £5 and £100 million, and this is to ensure that companies are best placed to be able to support the type of intervention that is quite aggressive and fast-paced with Sharing and Growth team. As John mentioned earlier on, we do have another quote here from a company who was a beneficiary to the Sharing and Growth Aerospace Programme. Fantastic outcomes from companies who have engaged in the programme thus far, and we would certainly expect the same from organisations and companies engaging on the offshore wind programme. So in terms of the scope of the programme, Sharing and Growth Offshore Wind Programme is designed to be a high intensity programme, and it's aimed at ambitious companies looking to compete nationally and internationally who are willing to commit to bespoke an integrated programme that can develop leadership, culture and competitive and operational capability in order to grow profitability. So if that sounds like that's up your street, then the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership and Sharing and Growth Offshore Wind Programme could be for you. In terms of the process for the application, and I'm going to kind of hark back to what Andy mentioned earlier on in the presentation. This is the sort of process flow, if you will, that we will follow through the implementation of the programme. So next week, starting next week, companies may request a one-to-one with the Sharing and Growth team, and that's in order to complete the expression of interest and application process, and also to gain more detailed insight into what's involved in the programme and how Sharing and Growth can support their organisation. Companies are asked to contact ourselves at OWGP to arrange and to book that one-to-one with the Sharing and Growth team. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. In terms of the expression of interest process, applicants will be able to submit an expression of interest through the forms that can be found on our website. After we have received the applications will be reviewed by assessors based on the information provided by the applicants. After the applications have been reviewed, Sharing and Growth will generate a short list of companies and then will host a due diligence process, which will include a site visit by the Sharing and Growth team to meet the senior management team of the company. And that's in order to discuss in more depth their application and assess initial leadership capabilities and collate some required information. Through discussions, Sharing and Growth will look to confirm the financial health of applicant companies and understand business growth ambition and business challenges inhibiting growth. That will then result in a one-page summary, which will then be reviewed by the Sharing and Growth team. When all the due diligence activities have been completed, the applicant summaries will be reviewed by the Sharing and Growth Executive Committee and will then be shared with the Offshore Wind Growth Partnership Board. Each SiG Investment Board recommendation will be passed on, as I say, and then we will review and we will take a decision on the applicants. So in terms of the next part, in terms of the engagement, diagnosis and prioritisation, successful applicants will be notified by the 13th of November following the evaluation and selection process. As I mentioned, even if you're not successful, we will get back to you and provide feedback on your application. Successful applicants will be required to contract with both OWGP and Sharing and Growth prior to participation in the programme. In terms of contractual obligations with OWGP, we will issue a contract in the form of a grant offer letter in order for the successful applicant to receive the grant funding to participate in the programme. And it's worth just mentioning that the grant award can only be used for the purposes of payment to Sharing and Growth for the delivery of the programme. Sharing and Growth will also issue a contract which will be signed by the successful applicant to cover adherence to the obligations required in terms of the programme delivery. Thereafter, the programme will commence and the Sharing and Growth team will work with successful applicants to complete a diagnostic assessment to establish the key focus areas for the initial intervention activities. So in terms of the focused intervention, OWGP will monitor successful applicants and track progress in line with key performance indicators of the programme. Intervention activities will be led by Sharing and Growth and delivered over a 6 to 9 month period from the project kick-off date, and applicant companies should ensure that they have suitable bandwidth capability and critically senior management buy-in to be able to support the activities as a condition of their application. So moving on now to eligibility, there are a number of criteria which applicants should be aware of and should ensure that they meet as a condition of application. So applicants should have senior leadership commitment and buy-in to the participation of the programme. That's really critical, as John has already outlined in terms of his engagement with the programme. Be a UK registered company with turnover requirements, as I mentioned earlier on, 5 million to 100 million per annum. They should demonstrate existing capability in the offshore wind sector. And that's really important as we want to baseline against companies who are already existing in the sector at this time. There are other programmes that are available to cross-sector companies or companies wishing to enter the offshore wind sector that Andy McDonald mentioned at the start of the presentation. We need companies to be able to clearly articulate their desire to grow their presence in the sector. We also need companies to be able to reflect and understand their own needs as a business and have a proactive attitude towards business improvement. Companies should provide detailed information to Sharing and Growth and OWGP during the programme, and companies are asked to only submit one submission per company. As part of the application, applicant companies would be asked to demonstrate how the intervention would impact their business and what additionality being involved in the programme would provide. So the applicant questions, there are 4 main sections to the application. Applicant information, a project overview, eligibility and financial health. It's important that during the application that you make, that you answer each question as fully as you possibly can, obviously keeping within the character count that is specified in the application itself. This is in order to ensure that your application is fully reviewed, and also to ensure that you give yourself the best possible opportunity of success. I mentioned earlier on that one-to-ones will be available. Apologies. Just in terms of the application form, before I move on to the one-to-ones, the application form itself is fairly self-explanatory. It does have a number of subsections and a number of hints and tips, which we would encourage you to have a look through while you answer your question and ensure that you've answered all questions, as I mentioned already. This application can be found on the OWGP website under the Opportunities tab and Business Transformation Programmes. The one-to-ones with Sharing and Growth can be booked from after the webinar, and they will commence from the 21st of September, which is this coming Monday, until the 7th of October. These will be 45-minute sessions, which will allow you to get to know Sharing and Growth a little bit more and find out a little bit more about how your company could potentially be supported through the programme. In order to request a session, please email info@owgp.org.uk and one of the team will get back to you on your application. We will then phone you and liaise with you to find a good time when we could have the one-to-one session, and then we will liaise with Sharing and Growth to ensure availability. We will then send out a meeting request to you, and that's you all set to meet with Sharing and Growth. Please allow us at least 2 days advance notice in order to ensure that we can work our way through the inquiries, as we expect there will be high demand. In terms of your submission of your expression of interest application, please ensure that you have registered on the OWGP website, clicking the I'm interested box at the very top of the website. Once you've completed your application, please give it a sensible name. The one below is an example, so company name and Sharing and Growth Offshore Wind EOI application or something like that. It is provided in a PDF format. Please complete the application in the format provided. Send the application to info@owgp.org.uk and we will confirm receipt of your application. Applications will all be reviewed after the closing date. So what is the closing date and what are the timescales associated with the programme? So we've had the applications open since the 4th of September, and today is our briefing event, so we can tick both of those off. The one-to-one meetings with Sharing and Growth, as I mentioned, will commence on Monday, the 21st of September, and will conclude on 7th of October. Please ensure that you contact us at the earliest opportunity to ensure that you're able to successfully have a one-to-one with Sharing and Growth. Expression of interest applications will close on Friday, the 9th of October at 5 p.m. Please ensure, if you wish to make an application, that your application is received by OWGP before 5 p.m. Applicants will be notified of the outcome of their application on the 13th of November. Just a quick recap then. I know there's been a lot of information that we've shared with you today, so just a very brief recap. Applicant companies can request a one-to-one with Sharing and Growth at info@owgp.org.uk. An applicant will then complete and submit an expression of interest prior to the opportunity deadline. Sharing and Growth will conduct a due diligence process with a short list of applicant companies. Sharing and Growth and OWGP will select companies for participation in the Sharing and Growth Offshore Wind Programme. SiG will work with selected companies to understand current leadership and organisational practices and embed proven approaches and techniques to deliver and drive organisational improvements. As I say, application deadline is the 9th of October, and we look forward to receiving your applications very soon.